Picture this. It's 2 a.m. on October 15th, 2025. Inside the FSB's primary command center in Moscow, coffee cups are shaking on desks. Alarms are screaming. Radar screens are lit up like a Christmas tree from hell. 40 incoming targets, every single one broadcasting the electronic signature of a HIMARS rocket, the weapon system Russia fears most. A senior officer is shouting orders that would make your eardrums bleed. This is it. The decapitation strike they've been dreading. Ukraine is throwing everything at the heart of Mother Russia. Except they're not. What Russia doesn't know yet, what they won't understand until it's far too late, is that those 40 targets streaking toward Moscow and Kaliningrad are nothing but bait. Cheap decoys worth about $1,000 each, broadcasting fake signatures while Russia's billion-dollar defense systems scramble into overdrive. And while every eye in the Kremlin is locked on the north, watching their most advanced air defenses swat down glorified flying trash cans, the real nightmare is beginning 800 miles to the south. Ukraine has just launched the most sophisticated drone operation in modern warfare. They're calling it the Festival of Fiery Oil. By sunrise, 4 of Russia's most critical refineries will be burning. The Russian war machine will be gasping for fuel, and the world will wake up to a new, terrifying reality. You don't need stealth bombers or cruise missiles to cripple a superpower's economy. You just need to be smarter. The phantom strategy that fooled an empire. Let's rewind and understand the brilliance of what Ukraine pulled off. This wasn't just a drone strike. This was a masterclass in psychological warfare, electronic deception, and exploiting every weakness in Russia's supposedly impenetrable defense network. The operation hinged on something Ukraine calls the Swarm Phantom Relay. Here's how it works. You send cheap decoys that look expensive on radar, while your real attack drones stay invisible using encrypted Starlink connections and revolutionary AI that hops frequencies every 2 seconds. Russia's jammers can't touch them. It's like watching a magician. You're staring at the hand waving in the air while the other hand is picking your pocket. Those 25 FPV drones screaming toward Moscow at 50 feet off the ground, pure theater. The 15 heading to Kaliningrad, actors in a play. But Russia bought every second of it. They activated every Pantsir battery. They brought the Krasika 4 jamming systems online. They were preparing for Armageddon while Ukraine was preparing for surgery. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. For those critical minutes, Russian commanders genuinely believed they were under a full-scale decapitation strike. Their minds weren't thinking about oil refineries in the south, they were thinking about survival, about protecting the Kremlin, about whether this was the opening salvo of World War III. That tunnel vision, that fear-driven focus created the exact blind spot Ukraine needed. Target 1, Volgograd, when your own defenses become your enemy. At 3:44 a.m., while Moscow's air defenses were still catching their breath from swatting decoys, the real game began over Volgograd. 4 attack drones separated from the main swarm, targeting the refinery's hydrocracker unit, a sprawling beast of pipes and reactors that strips sulfur from diesel fuel. Without it, you can't make military-grade fuel. It's the heart of the operation. But Russia wasn't asleep at the wheel. A Pantsir S-1 system locked onto those 4 drones immediately. And they had a new trick up their sleeve. Massive anti-drone nets strung between cranes like a steel spider web. Simple, crude, but effective. For a moment, it looked like basic math. 4 drones versus missiles and a physical wall. Russia was about to win. That's exactly what Ukraine wanted them to think. 4 other drones, the ones that had been flying quietly in the background like understudies waiting in the wings, suddenly changed their entire behavior. They pitched upward aggressively, climbing to 5,000 feet, and activated corner reflectors. These simple pieces of metal bounced radar signals back with such intensity that to Russian radar, those 4 cheap drones suddenly looked like Kalibr cruise missiles. The Pantsir's automated system did what it was programmed to do: engage the biggest, fastest, highest priority threat. It dropped its lock on the real drones and swung skyward, unleashing a volley of expensive 56E6 interceptors. Russia's billion-dollar defense system was now shooting down 4 decoys with perfect textbook precision, like a lion abandoning a real hunt to attack its own shadow. But here's where it gets beautiful. The electromagnetic energy from the Pantsir's own radar, combined with the explosive force of its missiles detonating in the sky, created a temporary wave of interference that blinded Russian radar for 30 critical seconds. At the exact same time, a strong gust of wind swept across the refinery, causing those massive anti-drone nets to sway, exposing the rear of the hydrocracker unit. 30 seconds, that's all they needed. The 4 real attack drones, patiently waiting below the radar clutter, received their final authorization via encrypted Starlink relay. They accelerated, banked hard, and flew straight through the gap. The impacts came in rapid sequence, and the resulting explosion burned for 2 hours, causing $10 million in damage and taking a critical facility offline. Volgograd was engulfed in smoke, crippling 10% of the fuel supply for Russia's southern front. Target 2, Ufa, when jamming becomes a suicide weapon. If Volgograd was impressive, Ufa was a technical masterpiece. The Bashneft refinery sits 850 miles from the Ukrainian border, protected by the infamous Kstovo 4, a jamming beast that floods a 185-mile radius with electronic noise, so powerful it can scramble anything from drones to GPS signals. To the Russian commander, the problem was solved. You can't hit what you can't see, right? Wrong. At 4:30 a.m., while Volgograd was still burning, the next swarm crossed into Russian airspace. Their target, the ELU AVT-6 crude distillation unit, processing 8 million tons of oil annually. Russia grounded all civilian traffic at Ufa International Airport and flipped the switch on the Kstovo 4, creating an electromagnetic dome they thought was impenetrable. But Ukraine's AI had already modeled the Kstovo's jamming patterns. As the jamming wave hit them, the decoy drones didn't resist. Instead, they broadcast a fake, distorted GPS signal that looked like drones struggling and failing under electronic assault. The Pantsir system's computer saw what it thought was a wounded, vulnerable target and fired. The missile locked on the nearest real signal matching the flight path, a Russian civilian surveillance drone flying just outside the main jamming cone. Russian operators watched in horror as their multi-million-dollar missile obliterated their own asset. But here's where it gets worse. The Kstovo 4 was so powerful, it wasn't just blinding Ukrainian drones, it was blinding everything. Russia's own Orlan patrol drones, tasked with spotting low-flying intruders, suddenly lost their command links and dropped into emergency return-to-base mode. For 45 critical seconds, the refinery's local eyes were completely blind. It's like turning on a fire hose to deal with a leak, only to flood your own house in the process. That was the window. The real attack drones, 10 of them, had been flying silently using internal gyroscopes and terrain-matching systems, completely immune to the jamming that was crippling Russia's own forces. The swarm's AI brain used the encrypted Starlink connection, the one the Kstovo couldn't touch, to assign final targets. They surged forward, exploiting a gap in the anti-drone netting that swayed under a sudden gust, leaving the unit exposed. They slammed into the ELU AVT-6 unit, turning 8 million tons of annual refining capacity into a raging inferno. Ufa International Airport remained closed for 4 hours, not because of the drone threat, but because of the massive plume of toxic smoke drifting across its runways. Ufa was burning, taking 15% of Central Asian fuel production with it. Target 3, Saratov, when the fighter pilot's fatal pride. By 5:15 a.m., Russia was done playing games. After the humiliation at Ufa, they unleashed their top gun, a Sukhoi 35 multi-role fighter armed to the teeth and prowling the skies over the Saratov refinery. No more automated systems. This was personal, a human pilot out for blood. The Ukrainian swarm for this target consisted of just 6 drones against a state-of-the-art fighter jet. It should have been a massacre. The Su-35's pilot's powerful Irbis-E radar picked them up from miles away. He smiled, fish in a barrel. But as he closed in, something felt wrong. The targets weren't flying like drones, they were gliding, dipping, moving in the erratic, unpredictable patterns of a flock of birds. He switched to optical sensors and stared in disbelief. They looked like birds. These were flamingo variants fitted with experimental biomimetic wings developed with French technology. To the Su-35's advanced radar, they registered not as military threats, but as biological clutter. The highly trained pilot was caught in a bizarre dilemma: fire a multi-million-dollar missile at what could just be geese, or ignore a potential threat. His professional pride took over. He wasn't going to be fooled. He engaged his afterburner, executing a high-G turn that pushed his aircraft to its limits. And that was the mistake Ukraine was counting on. The Su-35's violent maneuver created massive wake turbulence that completely scrambled the readings of the ground-based S-400 radar. At the same time, the pilot, fixated on his phantom prey, had been lured miles away from the refinery itself. A perfect temporary blind spot created not by jamming, but by the pilot's own aggression. The real attack drones, a second swarm that had been using the Flamingos as a screen, received their final targeting data from a relay AI using imagery from a US commercial satellite. They surged forward. The anti-drone netting, improperly secured against high winds, had already been blown partially aside. The drones didn't hesitate. The Saratov refinery erupted in a secondary explosion visible for miles. And the Su-35 pilot finally got his missile lock on the last remaining decoy, vaporizing a $1,000 piece of foam and electronics in a flash of victory. He'd won his personal battle, completely unaware he'd already lost the war. Saratov was burning, and gas lines were forming across Russia.
Target 4, Kstovo. The final fortress falls to friendly fire. At 5:40 a.m., the Kstovo refinery was a fortress. Not a single line of defense, a layered death trap. A Tor M2 system capable of engaging 4 targets simultaneously formed the inner ring. A battery of Pantsir S-1s covered mid-range. Thick, multi-layered anti-drone netting wrapped around high-value units like a steel cocoon. And circling above it all was an Orlan 10 drone acting as an airborne mothership, spotting any threat that got past ground-based radar. The Russians hadn't just prepared for an attack, they'd created a kill box. 7 Ukrainian drones approached their target, the L-24-300 hydro treatment unit. But this time, they didn't try to fly high or low. They flew straight into the teeth of the defense. As soon as the Tor M2's radar locked onto them, the drones executed their final desperate gambit. Small wing-mounted pods on each drone activated, releasing a cloud of tiny reflective chaff particles. Each one precisely engineered to bloom in the air and create massive phantom radar signatures. To the Tor M2's sophisticated computer, 7 drones had just become 70. The system was overwhelmed, its targeting logic thrown into chaos, a digital panic attack. The Tor M2 did what it was programmed to do. It started firing. Missiles screamed off the rails, detonating harmlessly in the middle of the chaff cloud. At the same time, the Pantsir system, trying to help, locked onto what it thought were leaking threats. But in the electronic confusion, it didn't lock onto a Ukrainian drone. It locked onto the friendly Orlan 10 mothership circling overhead. Russian operators watched in horror as their own air defense systems shot each other out of the sky. During the 20-second window of fratricidal confusion, the real attack drones flew through their own smokescreen, now feet away from their objective. The multi-layered netting revealed its fatal flaw. It wasn't designed to cover the massive, complex shape of a hydro treatment unit completely. There were gaps at the top where the structure met the sky. The relay AI, using an open-source data link routed through commercial satellites, transmitted the final attack vectors. The 7 drones pitched up sharply, clearing the top of the nets, and dove directly down into the heart of the L-24-300 unit. The resulting explosion was the largest of the night. A column of thick black smoke mushroomed 1,000 feet into the air. Russia had thrown everything at the attack: Tor missiles, Pantsir cannons, netting, patrol drones. In the end, they'd only succeeded in shooting themselves down. The morning after, when the smoke cleared and the empire trembled. The final drone hit the L-24-300 unit at precisely 4:46 a.m. on October 16th. To understand why this specific impact was so devastating, you have to understand the target. 15 pounds of explosives won't do much against reinforced concrete, but a hydrocracker isn't a bunker. It's a high-pressure maze of pipes filled with volatile hydrogen and superheated oil. Hitting it with an explosive charge is like tossing a spark into a pressurized fuel bomb. The resulting explosion tore through the unit, igniting a firestorm that crippled $47 million of critical infrastructure. The secret weapon wasn't the drones themselves, but the AI running the mission. It had analyzed thousands of hours of Russian jamming tactics, learning to predict the Krasuka's frequency hopping patterns with 95% accuracy, telling the drones which frequencies to jump to before the jammers even came online. The immediate aftermath was a strategic catastrophe for the Kremlin. In a single night, 4 of Russia's most important refineries were either severely damaged or completely knocked out. The total bill for Ukraine, roughly $400,000 in drones. The cost to Russia, over $100 million in direct damages, and the crippling of facilities that process a combined 43 million tons of oil a year. That's a staggering 38% of Russia's refined fuel exports temporarily crippled, sending shockwaves through their war machine. But the real damage wasn't economic, it was strategic. Panicked, the Kremlin did the only thing it could. It ordered S-400 and Pantsir air defense systems pulled from the front lines in Ukraine and redeployed to protect remaining refineries. Suddenly, massive holes appeared in the air defense umbrella covering Russian troops. Into that void, Ukrainian HIMARS and attack drones began flying, launching devastating strikes on command posts and ammunition depots that had been untouchable just days before. The new rules of warfare. In the span of a single night, Ukraine proved a terrifying new truth about modern warfare. It's not about who has the bigger army, but who can outthink their opponent. Russia thought its oil infrastructure was its strength. Ukraine just turned it into its biggest vulnerability. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a paradigm shift. For decades, nations have poured trillions into sophisticated air defense networks, believing that technological superiority equals invincibility. Ukraine just demonstrated that a few $100,000 in drones, guided by clever AI and human ingenuity, can dismantle systems worth billions. The cost-to-impact ratio is staggering and deeply unsettling for traditional military strategists worldwide. Consider the cascading effects. Those S-400 and Pantsir air defense systems pulled from the front lines created vulnerabilities that Ukrainian forces immediately exploited. Command posts that had operated with impunity suddenly found themselves under HIMARS fire. Ammunition depots that supplied entire battalions went up in flames. The protective umbrella that Russia had carefully constructed over years was torn apart in hours, all because they had to choose between protecting their economic heartland and protecting their troops. The psychological impact extends beyond the immediate tactical situation. Every refinery worker in Russia now understands they're a potential target. Every air defense operator knows their billion-dollar system can be fooled by cheap decoys and clever tactics. Every Russian commander must grapple with an impossible dilemma: spread defenses thin to protect everything, or concentrate them and leave critical infrastructure exposed. There's no good answer. That's exactly the point. The night Russia burned wasn't just about fire and explosions. It was about the future of warfare, and that future belongs to whoever can think faster, not shoot hardest. In an era where a laptop, commercially available drones, and brilliant tactical planning can achieve what once required billion-dollar bomber fleets, the rules of engagement have been permanently rewritten. The question isn't whether other conflicts will see similar tactics employed, it's when and how devastating the consequences will be when they inevitably occur.